This is Damian Macy from the Friends of the Library, and I'm at a cozy residence at 708 South 5th Street, the home of Jim Ryan. And he's going to visit with us today on the Friends of the Library project. And Jim came here from another community in 1961. He's been involved in his own business, in the business community, in church, and very much in local government. So with that, I will say welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Damien. To give you a little background, my business was at 107 North 7th Street, just a couple doors south of the post office. So I'm going to kind of give you a little background of the businesses along 7th Street when I came here, starting at the post office. Just south of the post office, Harvey Hurst had his liquor store, and the building was a rather antiquated building, and he had the store there for a good many years. He had to remove it, closed down later on because the wall came away from the floor and it wasn't safe to store big heavy objects anymore. Just south of that, Barney Millhouse had his barber shop, and of course he was the independent barber that had his own agenda, did a nice job on taking care of people's hair, and was an icon, I guess you'd say, in the town. Next to that, I had the Watkins product store. I came here from Galesburg, Illinois, with Watkins, and the idea is that Watkins worked house to house. We had local people, local dealers who called on their neighbors and friends selling products, household products, cosmetics, jewelry, spices, extracts, house cleaning items, a complete line of over 200 products. And just south of my Watkins store, Maxine English had a beauty shop. She was there for several years, and then Sandy Martin took over later. And directly south of that was an empty building, an empty part of a building. And Harry Baumsberger had the insurance business on the corner. Harry had been in business for quite some time there. And later on he retired. Just around the corner to the east was a business area that had several different residents. Ruby Kronk was there probably longer than anybody, but it had several different residents in that building. Next to that was the old City Hall, and above the City Hall was a library, a place where the city council persons met. And just next to that was a fire station, a two-bay fire station. The trucks were parked one behind the other, so they actually had room for 4 trucks. That building is still there. It's privately owned right now. And then just east of the fire station was a restaurant, Jerry Hollingsworth, that was there for many years. And before the present locations were set up, there was a laundromat right next to the restaurant of Jerry's. And the laundromat was there for many years, 2 or 3 different owners that had the laundromat. And just east of the laundromat was the Marathon Oil Station, where the present firehouse is now. And those businesses were there for a good many years. Then moving back over on 7th Street, across from the post office on the west side of the street, a little tile building, Fred Blundell had his insurance business there. And when you crossed the alley, you were at the side of Caldwell's dime store. Pearl Ritchie and Doris Burnham and several other people helped Bill Caldwell in the business. Bill's dad started, Frank Caldwell was there actually running the business when I moved to town. And just west of Caldwell's was Kenny Cole's newsstand. Kenny was the distributor for the morning paper, also had books and all different types of things for sale. Also had a pool table, several pool tables for the people, and a couple of my daughters carried the papers for Kenny in different parts of town. Just west of Cole's newsstand, Bill Taylor was operating his appliance business. He had just bought the business completely. Morris Staub had helped him before, but when I came here, Bill was in business for himself. Just west of that was the Red and White grocery store. It had been a Kroger store previously, and Dwayne Huey was the operator of that.
Jim, I believe the Taylor store, he was selling primarily television and radios and equipment like that, and then also air conditioners, wasn't he?
Yes, sir. I bought washing machine off him too.
Okay.
So, anyway, just west of the grocery store, Paul Martin had his drugstore, and then west of that, Joe Macy had the hardware and shoe repair business. And there was an little known fact about that. He had an elevator in the back of that store, and most people didn't realize that. It was a freight elevator, it wasn't a people elevator. It was made to move his supplies from upstairs, downstairs, etc. And then west of that was a tavern, and then on the corner was a Delaney Bank. And so that kind of brings you up to date on some of the buildings there in that area. There were several other buildings on the south side of the street, one of which was Flowers Implement, which had an elevator also. So there were 2 elevators in buildings on Main Street when I came here. To give you a little background on some of the things I did, when we moved here, I had a wife and 4 kids, and my job was to establish dealerships for Watkins products, to establish in 7 counties. I had at the time I came here 1 part-time worker in Charleston and a part-time worker in Terre Haute area. So actually we had practically nothing. So I had to work out the idea to recruit people, to train people, to service people, and to keep them motivated. So I worked on a schedule since I had 7 counties. On Mondays I went north in Edgar County, and Tuesdays I went south in Crawford County. Wednesdays I was in Clark County. Thursdays I went west and worked in the Greenup area, parts of Newton area. And Fridays I worked in Terre Haute, and Saturday I was in Marshall all morning. So it wasn't easy work because people had a phobia against house-to-house salespeople. So we not only had to recruit people, we had to train people and then keep them motivated. They were on a commission basis, so that they had to go out and work in order to make any money. And my job was to get them to go out and work and make money. So I tried all different techniques and found out that several things worked. We had quite a turnover, of course. And at the time we started, we found out that perhaps 3 to 4 homes out of every 5 would find someone there. Today, of course, that's not the case. The business has changed so much, it's not really comparable. But I'd had to train people to sell, had to show them how to demonstrate things. And sometimes it was kind of frustrating, but I was very happy to say that eventually I had over 200 people that worked at various times, and the most I had working at any one time was 63 or 4. But that was really more than I could handle, because on the days I went to different directions, I took supplies to the dealers so they wouldn't have to come pick up their supplies.
Jim, did you maintain an inventory, or did any of them maintain an inventory in their location?
I had quite an inventory at my place there. That means that when someone sold a product, they could have it delivered to their customer within a week. Sometimes a few of my dealers kept a small inventory in their house so they could sell right out of the house if they wanted to. But most of the time, I delivered to them on this previously mentioned schedule, and then also at the same time I was trying to get more people, so it was a constant process. As you well imagine, some of them didn't like to do sales work at all, and some didn't like to do house-to-house sales work. So consequently, it was a challenge. After we came here, when we came to Marshall, we had 4 children, and then had 3 more daughters born here in Marshall. The last was a set of twins born in '67, and they helped out in the store as they grew up and learned a little bit about sales work and about working in the store. My wife got sick with cancer and passed away in 1977, and I had 3 kids at home at that time, 2 10-year-olds and a 13-year-old. My son was a senior in high school, so he wasn't around too much longer until he went to college. And back in 1977, when my wife passed away, Watkins went to bankruptcy court, and I was scared they're going to go out of business. And of course, I had several people to be responsible for and keep the children. So I started looking around for another job, and Owen Flowers and Bob Flowers talked to me. And after my wife passed away, I went to work for Flowers Sales, selling vehicles, and was quite successful. I was a top salesman most of the time. And then when Owen Flowers died, it went upset the whole thing. And I went to work at the Martinsville State Bank at that time. And then after the bank closed, I worked for Mike Mooney at Paris, and worked for him until I retired when I was 78. Anyway, to get a little more details on some other things, after my wife passed away, I worked at Mooney's. I'd sold my Watkins business in 1980, and that enabled me to have full-time with Watkins products. And Ted Trez came to me a couple of years later. Ted was the mayor at that time, and Bill Bubeck just passed away, and they had to find a replacement. So Ted asked me if I wanted to be on the city council, and I thought about it a little bit and talked to most all the present councilmen at that time and decided to give it a try. So I had the learning experience like anybody else, but then I began to settle into the business. Ted passed away, and Dick Smitley was elected to be the mayor. The council elected at that time. Dick was mayor for several years, and at that time I was able to be available because I was working at Mooney's at Paris at that time. I was on the Economic Development Committee, City Hall, and an interesting experiences that way. Economic development was something we were working on. We did not have an economic development director. The council members, the 3 council members, were working on it individually. And we had some really fine success. Ben Fairhurst was the president or manager of the First Financial Bank, or First National Bank at that time. And he knew a gentleman in Terre Haute with a business, and he physically put him in his car and drove him over to Marshall, and he said, "You should be in this town." And that was the business that now called Doric Products. Okay. They started out in the old Chevrolet garage. At that time, Shannon Ashley bought out Geckler's, and he sold out the Chevrolet Buick business to Owen Flowers. So the building was available, and they went into that building, and then later they moved out on 2nd Street and built their own building, and since then several other buildings. The board of directors of Doric Products at that time, all from the South, from Alabama and that area, and we made some good friendships. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to keep some of the friendships because some of the people moved away, and the ones from the South all passed on. So it was an interesting business that has started here and pretty well established in Marshall. Another item of interest at that time, TRW was and still is our leading employer, and Jim Squatrito was the general manager, and one day he asked for a meeting, so the Economic Development Committee of Kenny Smith and Bear Clatfelder and Dick Smitley and myself went down and talked to him. I remember sitting at the opposite end of the table from Mr. Squatrito, and he openly said, "What can you do for us? We've had an offer from the state of Kentucky to move down there. We have an empty building in Colorado, and England, the country of England overseas, has offered to put up a building for us. What can you do for us?" Those are tough questions to try to answer. So we told him that we'd do whatever it took to keep him here. And he outlined several things, 2 of which were the streets were not up to the standards that he wanted. So we did a little soul searching and contacted the Department of Commerce and Economic Development, DECA as it's called, at the state of Illinois. They came down, and we had a gentleman from TRW, and some of our people told them what they needed. And we had a good salesman who has passed away now, who was doing a super job of selling to the state. And the outcome was we were able to get a grant to widen and make a heavier street out of 2nd Street, South 2nd Street, so they could come from Archer Avenue down to the plant on a better street. And that was the beginning that since it improved Vine Street back out to Highway 1. And that we had 2 businesses in the area at that time. TRW's expanded quite a bit. We've actually built a water tower for them to give them better service. They need constant electric service. If the electricity goes off for just 2 or 3 seconds, it upsets all their machinery. So that is extremely important for them. We learned a lot on the Economic Development Committee. We learned a lot about how to go about doing things. And one day, a gentleman came to us and he said, we've been in a business building down in Robinson making labels. And we sold our business to a company from Florida. But some of our customers have come to us and said that they were told by the company from Florida they weren't big enough customers, so they dropped them. And so this people from the small businesses said to our people from Robinson, will you open up a business again? Well, unfortunately, several of them signed a non-compete clause, so they had to work kind of behind the scenes. And I was fortunate enough that I knew where there's an empty building that my boss had owned, and part of it was not occupied, so we got them in the back of the old Flowers building, and they were doing well. And then that building got sold to Mr. Forsythe, and he wanted the whole building, so we had to move them to the old Ford garage on 6th Street, and they were there for a short period of time, and then now they've located out on the East Cutoff area, just off the road going down to Tarbell's lime pit. And they have expanded twice. They bought an additional 10 acres so that they have future land to expand. And it's been a very, very good business for the city. Unfortunately, they do not want any publicity. And so we can't brag on them too much, but I do know the facts. They've been, Phil Freeman is the key man. But an interesting thing about the business, when they came to town, there were 5 people who had been in business before in the label business in Robinson. And they made an agreement among themselves they would take no salary for the first year. So consequently, those people lived on what they had accumulated, their savings. And when they hired anyone, they would not hire somebody they didn't know a lot about. And they now have expanded up to 19 people. So they don't want publicity, so we can't brag on them too much. But Lakeland College told us about 5 or 6 months ago, which is the year 2014, that is our hidden gem. They have one of the biggest businesses in the area, but they don't want publicity, so we can't brag on them. So that makes part of the situation just a little more difficult there. A couple of other things I'd like to talk about that involving business. Once upon a time, a while back, I can't remember the year, a gentleman called me on the phone one day, and he said, "Are you in the Economic Development Committee?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I'd like to talk to you a bit about your business abilities and what you have available." And he said, "Now, I know more about your city than you do." He said, "I've been taking the newspaper for the last 5 or 6 months," and he said that I know what's going on. I know exactly where TRW is. I know where all the places are. But he said, I wanted to know a little bit more about it. So when people talk to you like that, many times they say we don't want to be identified. So we have to work on the quiet, so to speak. And to my knowledge, that man never came back. What kept him away, I don't know. He wouldn't disclose his business. But this is what is behind economic development. And many residents don't realize the secrecy that has to be involved. And they want to know who's coming to town and who's not coming to town, which is human nature to know that. But if you deal with economic development, you're going to find that a lot of confidentiality, a lot of secrecy has to be involved. So don't feel bad if your local economic development director doesn't talk to you about X, Y, or Z business. It's something that they really can't do. Over the years now, going back to TRW, we built a water tower down there to give them better water protection, water service, and we've done many things to help TRW. At one time, 45% of our electric bill was paid by TRW, so that's a reason we need to take care of them. To give a little bit more about some of the other things in city government, I'm going to mention a little bit about the decision we had made in the early 1990s. Our city hall, so to speak, upstairs where we had over the business office where we had our meetings, was not conducive to a big metropolitan area and not conducive to a small town. It just wasn't very good at all. So we made the decision we'd have to build a new city hall. We had the ground located on Highway 1, just a block south of Archer Avenue. And then the problem came about designing the building. We had limits on budget. We felt the people on the committee at that time were very concerned about dollars. So we had several plans drawn up, one with a basement which would have been ideal and which we really should have used. At that time our knowledge wasn't as it is now. So we chose to go with a single-story building with the decorations that are now in place, and I think it's a nice building. It was finally built in 1995. Unfortunately, we did not build it with a basement, and in the last couple of years they had to build another building out in the 14th and Archer area to store records and things. We had the upstairs over our library. See, the library is in the old grocery store building, and that library floor is not that great. We had too much weight up there. We were concerned about the floor giving way. But anyway, we got the building built, and we got City Hall, and it's been functioning. And we do wish we had a greater storage area, particularly in the basement. We had plans drawn for the basement, and then we vetoed it because of lack of guaranteed income. So the city has many attributes and actions, but one of the things that makes Marshall so good in my mind is zoning. If you go to a town to the west of us, about 17 miles, you'll find a town without zoning, and you can see the results of it there. If you go 15 miles north, you'll see a town that is not able to draw their executives from the businesses. Their executives move to Marshall or Terre Haute. And if you go looking, I was up there in that area last Monday, and I drove down the streets, and it's just very disheartening. Practically every block had a building that was either falling down or burned down or needed to be tore down. And I think some of the attributes of Marshall is the zoning, and we do have a wide main street. That makes a good impression on people when they first come to town. We have clean sidewalks and clean streets, and of course with the new streetscape we've had, which is the second streetscape, which we just finished this past summer, that really helps brighten the town up. And we've been fortunate enough that city fathers were able to get grants for 2 different streetscapes, and both of them are very, very helpful in making our town attractive. Something else that I need to mention is that positive actions and positive stories help build reputation of the city, and I like to stress the fact that I like to think positive. I don't know if anybody have any questions. Damien, did you want to ask a question or two?
I'm interested in your businesses that you identified that were here, and I guess fortunately most all of those buildings are still here except for the firehouse was developed. You did not mention a building on the corner that used to be called the Keystone Cafe. I'm sure that was there and operating when
that wasn't there when Jerry Hollingsworth had his restaurant.
no, I'm talking about on Route 1. Right at the corner of Route 1, there was a diamond-shaped or a keystone-shaped building.
Wasn't there.
Okay.
Brooks Burns, well, not Brooks, but his dad had a Philip Marathon station there, and there was someone in there ahead of him, but I can't recall who it was.
Okay. Well, it's interesting to hear some of those backgrounds of the buildings and the businesses, and I totally agree with you that Marshall is a great place. We lived in the Chicago area several years and moved back. Never looked back a minute or never regretted that. I sure don't miss the city traffic. Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure, and you've added a lot of things that many of us, I think, have forgotten, and are certainly glad to know about. We appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
I've got a question for you, Damien, and a question for the future for people who might be listening to this. Can you name the 2 buildings on Main Street that are only 12 feet wide?
I think so. Felix Farrell barber shop is one of those, and the other one is the leather shop,
Shoe repair.
that shoe repair shop.
Yeah,
I think those are probably the narrowest.
yeah, they're the two 12-foot wide buildings in town.
And fortunately, they're pretty well maintained and still occupied and active businesses in those.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, thanks again, Jim. We appreciate your
Thank
time.
you. If you have
and
any
your
more
input.
questions, well, give me a call.
Thank you much.